back in 1981, let's start earlier with that. The formation of the Black Panther Party in the U.S. was, one of the most important, like, progressive, radical developments in U.S. history. This was really radical black leadership of the working class that was pushing the movement forward. And Mumia Abu-Jamal, when he was 14 years old, joined the Black Panthers.
Mm.
And he immediately started writing for their newspaper. And he was a great writer, great reporter, an amazing orator. Like he had this amazing voice even then. And if you're familiar with the FBI COINTELPRO program, which was this surveillance and assassination program, it's the program that the FBI killed Fred Hampton
Yep.
using.
Yep.
Um, Mumia was surveilled by the FBI through COINTELPRO when he was as young as 15 years old. And it was because they acknowledged that he had a great talent for public speaking. That was what got him on the state's radar. He became a very important journalist in Philadelphia. He was the president of the National Association of Black Journalists, the Philadelphia chapter. Um, and it's incredible to look back at the reporting he did in this period. He interviewed Bob Marley. He interviewed Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura on the original Star Trek show. Um, he won awards for his coverage of the Pope's visit to Philadelphia. But when he started to write about the MOVE organization, which was this group of revolutionary environmentalist, mostly black organization in Philadelphia, and he was writing not the police's perspective, but was actually going to interview them and talk to them, he started to get a lot of attention from the police and from the state. And we had Philadelphia in the 70s had an incredibly racist, incredibly fascist mayor named Frank Rizzo, who destroyed the Philadelphia chapter of the Black Panthers, who targeted MOVE, and Mumia refused to back down. And in fact, I just learned this from Janine Africa, who was a member of the Move Nine, who was recently released after 40 years in prison.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
See that story.
yeah. Um, she talked about how when the Philadelphia police murdered her infant child, Mumia came to their house and he sat with her and he let her take her time to say what she needed to say at her own pace. And it really made the MOVE organization and Mumia understand each other, and they became very close allies. Um, but this was also he was also a gig worker. And so because he was starting to lose work as a journalist because of his politics, he started driving a taxi. And one night, it was December 9th, 1981, he was driving his cab. He was near the area where his younger brother had a newsstand, at like 12th and Locust in Center City. And he drove up and saw a white cop brutally beating his little brother. And in going over as he walked over, someone else shot this cop. And that cop, Daniel Faulkner, shot Mumia. So when we talk about Mumia, it was before Rodney King. It was before George Floyd. It was before cell phone cameras. But he really was one of the other victims of police violence.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I feel like sometimes it's forgotten that he was shot by the police and he was brutally beaten. And but the thing that he did that they did not expect him to do was he survived.
He survived.
And since then, he has become the avatar of the prison industrial complex's horrible reach and power, and the symbol of the movement to abolish that system. Um, so it's always hard to answer who Mumia is because he's so many things.
So many. Yeah. Just hearing that story, just hearing you tell it, it's sort of like I can imagine everything right as it happened
Yeah.
yesterday or today.
Yes, yes.
Every time I hear that, and The reason why Mumia touches me in a different way because my father has been locked up my whole life.
Yes. I
And
remember us talking about that when we first met.
yeah, and that's something that resonates with me the most is the fact that I grew up without a father, and um I can't, and he's lost to mass incarceration.
Yes.
My father won't see the light of day until he's about probably 65.
Ugh.
And he's been released from prison. He did 20 years straight by the time he was 18,
Mm.
for allegedly committing the murder
Right.
of a police officer in New York City. I still don't know the full details of the story. My family refuses to tell me the truth.
Mm.
I knew my
It's
father
one of
had,
the most common ways that they frame black
yes,
men. You know.
yep, yep, absolutely. Back in the 80s, I was born in 88, a very rough time in New York area,
Mm.
definitely in the 80s. And yeah, my father was about that type of lifestyle. Not to say that he was, he's a very smart man. My father, absolutely was smart. My grandmother is a very well Christian lady, well brought up Christian lady, Christian background, always kept him in the church, always took care of my father and uncles. And yeah, I never had the opportunity to. The way I remember my childhood is going to different prisons, Rikers Island, some of the worst prisons you can think of. As a kid, I'm walking through all these gates. I just remember seeing barbed wires and gates just to see my dad for, a couple of hours, take a
Right.
couple of pictures, you eat, a little meal, and then you got to go.
Yeah.
And then I won't see him for another couple of years. And he missed all my graduations. He missed all the moments of a child that you don't want to miss, birthdays, Christmases, holidays. And I just remember talking to him over the phone every year saying, you know, I'll see you soon. And that soon will be another 10 years or 5 years. And when he was released for the first time, we actually bonded, and we actually got a chance to spend time as a free man. And it was the greatest feeling. He never did anything for me, never bought me anything, but it still was the greatest feeling that I remember at that time in my life, to have my father as a free man and not have to go travel and go through gates and barbed wire and security and guys with shotguns just to see my father. And I thought that he will, you know, stay out. And I thought that I would give him a reason to stay out and be a free man. But this criminal system and the system itself, the way it's designed, when they come out, even as convicts, ex-cons, they don't set them up for success.
Exactly.
They set them up to go right back into that system.
Exactly.
He literally got a job and he tried to do the right thing. And then he got laid off because after the background check comes off, oh, this guy, he's not going to change his life.
Right.
And the people around him, they're still out there doing the same thing. And he couldn't get away from that. He couldn't escape that. And unfortunately now, I won't see him until, once again, he's 65. And he's been writing me, throughout the course of the pandemic. And, I have to think about the fact that he's in there possibly around infected inmates. I'm sorry, not employees. That's me. That was me. But inmates,
Yeah.
and he's going through the same thing. He's going
Right.
through the same thing as Mumia, and I just feel it. I feel all of that.
Yeah.
You know.
And when you think about, so like, one thing that I noticed very early on, that when I would go and visit young men, just to do sort of welfare checks on behalf of the family through the Pennsylvania Prison Society, a lot of the young men I talked to also had fathers in prison, and it started to dawn on me that the effect of destroying mostly black families and taking members of the community out of the community, isolating them, was not just a side effect of mass incarceration. It was part of the policy. It is the function of mass incarceration, to take unemployed people who might otherwise stay in their community, perform other functions, organize, and fight for a better way of living, rather than have them stay on the street near their families, they take them away and warehouse them. And that, I think, is when we connect mass incarceration to the history of slavery in this country, that's when we start to realize that the worst aspects, the destruction of families, the separation of our children from their fathers and their mothers, is the plan. It's one of the functions of mass incarceration. It's not a unfortunate side effect.